Good evening, folks. Kia ora, and welcome to Spark. Before we get into it and introduce our lovely speakers today, I'm just here to start you off with a Karakia in the heat, so yeah, hope you enjoy. Tēnei o, te hāpai nei, te tiri nei, te pōkau nei. Mō tōku rea, mō tōku mana, mō tōku ihi. Te māpie mauria, kia mau kia ita. Haumia, huia, taikia. He honore, he kororia. He maungarongo ki te whenua, he whakairo a ki ngā. Tangata katoa āmi. Ko te mihi tuatahi, ki te atua, nāna nei ngā, katoa I hanga. Ko te mihi tuarua, ki te kingi Māori o te Haiti potato, te whirawhira te tuasitu. Me te whari āhuia pariki. Rire ho pai maharire. Ki te hunga mate, haere atu. Rā ki ngā kāroha, ora, tēnā tātou katoa. I tupu ake o ki Turaganui Kiwa, e noho ana o ki Tamaki Makaurau. E mihi ana ki ngā tāngata whenua, me ngā tohu o te rohe nei. No tauko aho, ko Daisy tōku ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa.
Hey everyone. So I'm going to introduce you to our first speaker, Dr. Habib Baluwala. Habib is a domain chapter lead for commercial data at Spark, where he is charged with expanding the number of machine learning use cases across the country. Habib previously worked in academia in biomedical engineering. He has a Doctor of Philosophy from the University of Oxford, as well as the Chief Data Officer Certification and Executive Data Science Certification. So please give Habib a warm welcome.
Judging from the conversations I've had while we were kind of having the pizzas and everything, it seems like everybody's quite interested in this topic and trying to understand that, okay, what does it mean for everyone in general, right? So my presentation, I'll possibly focus on more generically on generative AI rather than on ChatGPT, which is a kind of a subset of generative AI that we have. And if you have any questions in the meantime as well, please raise your hands. More than happy to answer in the middle as well. So no issues. Now, let me take you through a journey through 2022. What has happened in 2022, which can give us an idea about, okay, how is this field of generative AI or AI expanding quite fast? So one of the first things, does anybody recognize this picture by any chance? Any guesses? No, I know, you know, because you can see I've used it somewhere else earlier as well. Alright. So, but this picture actually won the award at the Colorado State Fair's State Fair Arts Competition. So what happened was, the person submitted this, he won the award, then he declared that this was partially created by an AI, and everybody else started saying that, okay, no, it's unfair, all images should be created also digitally by humans, not by AI and so on. But the judges felt like that, no, it still had the human touch behind it, so that's why they awarded the award to that particular image. So what we are seeing is, AI-generated images are winning awards in many cases. So, yeah. The other thing is AlphaFold. Okay, so I'm not sure, this is more related to biomedical engineering and the medical arena, but the protein structures that inhabit within our body are numerous, and there are also like millions of structures that are available, but it's very difficult to decipher them. Okay, what is the arrangement of the different elements within there in order to create a protein structure? So AI has actually helped to reveal that protein structure faster. Now, what does it mean? That in future, if you want to create drugs for treatment of cancer, for treatment of any other diseases, it will become much more easier, because now that mystery around which proteins are impacting us, how do we resolve, how do we stop them, is somewhat resolved in this case. So that's a big improvement. That's how AI has helped, a big achievement within the medical space as well. Other thing is, large language models have become mainstream. So that's why we are all here. and we're talking about large language models like ChatGPT, like Google Bard, because it has become main conversation. One of the Google engineers actually came out with a claim that Lambda, which was the large language model behind some of their work, has become sentient. Now, what does sentient mean, at least from the definition, is that it has started developing emotions, it has started developing feelings, and it's more like a living being rather than just an artificial intelligence. Now, that claim has been, yep, go ahead.
Is that the same Google engineer who revealed that after it got made redundant by Google?
I think so. Could be the case. Yes. No, okay.
Sure.
So the other thing was that though that claim was made, most of the people within the artificial intelligence community have disclaimed it. I basically said, okay, that's not possible because the large language models that we have, they don't have that capacity for the time being. So it has definitely not become sentient. That's a claim which is incorrect. But it comes to show that there are different concerns when it comes to AI, and at the same time, at one point is solving for the problem of the medical arena, where at the other point we are worried about, okay, is it becoming more sentient over there? Is it becoming more human-like? And an amazing figure for anybody to check out is, I think you must have seen those graphs. Facebook took around 1.5 to 2 years to reach 1 million users. ChatGPT was 1 week. There were many other, there were some older ones where it took around 5 years, 6 years, 10 years in order to reach 1 million users. 1 week. If today we look at it, today there are easily around 100 million users for ChatGPT. Yeah. So the kind of scale at which it's growing and it's evolving is much more faster than it has ever been experienced. Now, what does this all mean for us? Okay. So what I wanted to show to you that there is AI and there is generative AI. What is the difference between both of them? AI earlier was used to be only for predictive purposes, where we say that, okay, this artificial intelligence or this machine learning model will help us predict, is there going to be an accident, is there going to be some other event, and so on. What is generative AI? Generative AI means that based on your past behavior or your past content that you have created, I will be able to create new content for you. It's not a predictive approach, it's more about a contribution approach in terms of generating something new over there. And within this space, so for example, this is an image created by DALL-E 2, which is a very popular. So if you look at OpenAI, it has 2-3 main streams. One is ChatGPT, and the other one, the images they have is called DALL-E. And this was an image created based on a prompt from DALL-E, where they just said, can you create 2 teddy bears scuba diving with computers and things like that, and it's able to create that image. Now, there are other types of generative AI that are also coming up in the market. So for example, you have music, where you can give a prompt and you can create music as you like. So that's a library created by Google called Music LM. Within images, DALL-E 2 is one of the ones, but I think most people here might be aware of Midjourney, which is quite popular, and it gives very realistic images. So if you are, after the session, if you're free, just check out Midjourney images and you will really find that it's creating images of people that actually don't exist, and you would really feel like, okay, no, these are real people. You won't even think about, okay, this is created by artificial intelligence in any way. There is a few tools that are already in the market for presentations as well. One is called ChatGPT. Other one that I've used earlier was Gamma.app, which gives really good presentations for you. Similarly with voice, there is Whisper.ai. I think that's from AWS. Resemble AI, that's another independent company. Within videos, there's something called Terra. And for code, there is Codex and Metaphor and so on. So, anything that requires content generation, generative AI is involved in there, and it's trying to change that field by making it much more easier for you to create content. So, my question to you is that, why is ChatGPT or why is generative AI so special now? Like this thing has been going on for the past few years. What has changed and why it has changed to make it much more special and easier now? So here is an example. Let me see if I have this. Yeah. So this was an image which was created in 2016. Okay, and a same prompt was used in 2016, 2022, and 2023 on different systems. Now, if you look at the quality of this image, very small, lots of details not visible, and like it creates an image where it's impossible to see details and so on. Okay. Now, this was in 2022 by another algorithm that we call as stable diffusion. And if you see over here, there are certain details which are quite well done, but if you see the mirror over here, some details over here still missing. Okay. Now the same prompt is used in 2023, and this is created by DALL-E 2. Now if you see, the clarity of the lines and the images are a bit more realistic and actually getting much more better. So you can see a clear, you can see a clear exponential increase in terms of quality, in terms of output, in terms of the overall contribution of the details of the images as well. Now, just for everybody's background, why has this happened in the past few years? What has been the main driver over here? So, this one doesn't get, I'm not going to go too technical, but just to give you an idea, one of the main reasons for this is that the way these algorithms are trained have changed drastically. So some of the earlier methods that we have shown in 2016 was based on generative transformers. Now they're also using something called stable diffusion in order to create some of these images. So there has been a big change in terms of the training transformation. So methods and the techniques that have been used have evolved drastically in the past few years. The second reason has been the rise of the supercomputer. So the cost of actually training this has gone down drastically. So you have, here is an example of a chart for number of GPU that you can perform per second and the cost for it. So if you look at 2004, it was around zero, near to zero, but now it has reached to around 358 million flops per US dollar. So here, as you can see, the cost is reduced drastically. And the way you look at the share price for NVIDIA, it will reduce further in that case. So the cost of computing has gone, and if you see here, this is a drastic jump. And you see, it's not changing linearly, it's changing more on an exponential manner. And the last reason, which is the most, to me is the most important one, is that the quality of the data has improved drastically as well. So if you look at the number of, so here is a log scale, okay? So here it's 1,000, 1 million, 1 billion, and 1 trillion over here. So what we see is that these are the number of parameters that go into a machine learning model. Now, the more the parameters, the more better the learning. So if you look at GPT has around, I think, billion, and then GPT-4 has billion, around 44 billion or something like that. Can't remember the number, but very large amount. Now, if you see over here, that number has been growing on a more exponential pathway as well, which means that a lot of good data is now available for it to train, learn better, and then make its own interpretation based on that, which has been the biggest contributor. And one of the reasons for that was in the early 2000s, a lot of the US government invested a lot with universities to create these data sets. So one of the first ones, which was in 2012, where the first algorithm was tested, deep learning one, that was because it was possible only because they had around 1 million images already ready, which it could learn from, and then it can say, okay, now I've learned everything, now I can predict whether it's a cat or a dog with more accuracy in that. So, what I wanted to emphasize on this one a bit better, because the quality of the data will also determine how successful you are in the future in using these tools. Because if you want your own version of ChatGPT for yourself or a reflection of yourself, then you need to be careful about what quality of data you're feeding it. The worse you feed, the worse you will get. If you curate it, if you clean it properly and then provide it, you will get much more better results. Yeah. before I move to the next slide, any questions? Yep.
You mentioned NVIDIA. Other than NVIDIA, what are the other leading companies which provide hardware in this space?
There are a few more. AMD is another one, but with regards to GPU, I think NVIDIA is the leader over there. The other ones were said nowhere close to anywhere they can catch up to NVIDIA. Yeah. Nice. Now, so if I ask you this question, that what is generative AI actually contributing to us? What in the simplest terms, what is it doing so that to help you, or say to actually make you much more better? So here is the answer. Just try to think of an answer, and I'll ask it after the next slide. But here, if you look at this is the cartoon I really liked, which was somebody asking that the documentary on extinction is quite compelling. When is the next series going to come out? And they say, oh, is it going to be narrated by David Attenborough? And the robot says, no, I'm going to narrate it. Which is basically trying to say that, okay, I can narrate in a very similar style to David Attenborough. Yes. So let me show you a video about what are the future capabilities that generative AI is going to bring, and how is actually Microsoft looking at it in terms of its co-pilot program. So exciting and scary both at the same time. So if you see over here, what Microsoft is planning effectively is that for every product of Microsoft, or for example, every Office product, there will be a co-pilot along with it. And what does a co-pilot mean? It means that any task that is assigned to you, how can a co-pilot help you to reduce the time in order to achieve that? Yep.
The super duper Mr. Clippy.
Yes, super duper Mr. Clippy. But not I don't think it will be as hated as Mr. Clippy. So, and actually, I did ask somebody from Microsoft, why did you keep a name very similar to Clippy? I said there was a lot of negative sentiment associated with it. We didn't want it to be carried over. So here, the co-pilot program basically tries to emphasize that any task that you're currently doing, we can help you supercharge it and achieve it faster. Better quality as well for that. And an example for that one is, since ChatGPT was released, there was a study which was done by one of Fortune 500 companies, where it actually provided ChatGPT as an assistant to around 2,500 of its customers, of its employees, and the other 2,500 it didn't really provide it. And it compared what was the improvement in efficiency in terms of the work deliverables, customer experience, and so on. And they said that they saw a 14% improvement in people that were actually using large language model-like capabilities. The other thing they noticed was that people who had joined 2 months earlier were doing better in terms of the quality of the work in comparison to people that were working for more than 6 months. So it's not only in reducing the time, but it's also improving the quality of the output as well for you. So that's an important thing to remember. It's not just as a time-saving component that you see, but also in terms of if you are more focused on getting junior people through and you're finding it hard to find talent, then having a kind of a co-pilot along with them to help them scale better and grow faster would be quite relevant in this case. Yeah. Before I move on, next, yep.
Did you say 14 or 40?
14%. 14%. And I think the other thing is that if you look at the productivity growth in the past few years, it's always been around 1%, 2%, even with lots of this thing coming in. This is basically saying that we will improve productivity by more than 7% over that. So I'm not sure where it was, but it's basically estimated by one of the World Economic Forum reports that generative AI is going to bring in the biggest growth in GDP in comparison to any other technology before that. At least, let's say, in the next few years. Okay. Any questions?
So one thing I've noticed in using it, although I've been using search engines forever,
is not necessarily also the engine or how, it's more about how you frame it. And then once you've got the framework, if you do get something that doesn't seem right, question it. Because once you do, then you get more better quality. But ordinarily on the search engine, that might take me 10 minutes. ChatGPT takes me about 5.
Fine. I agree with it. And even for things where you are a novice and you just want some advice, you can possibly use that as a tool over there. So for example, one of the things we see is that lawyers might not be earning that much in the future because a lot of people will start asking ChatGPT and things like that in order for those answers, for the initial answers. So anybody who used to go to a lawyer for some initial advice, they might say, okay, can I get some initial advice through this tool? It might not be registered. I can take the risk, this small case. Do I really need advice on that? But also depends upon how comfortable are people with using this technology and depending on it. If you are a frequent user of ChatGPT, then you might be more easily agreeable to use it for legal advice as well. Okay. Something like that. So before I move on to the next slide, my question to you would be is that what do you think is the biggest contribution of generative AI in terms of what is, in the simplest terms, what is it providing to you or to humans? Yeah.
Oh, so quality data that's been refined.
Yeah. Sure.
Simply put.
Yep.
It's relieving some cognitive load.
Yes, definitely, very important load.
I think it's a shortcut in many ways. It just simplifies the process.
Definitely, yeah.
Just efficiency, isn't it?
Efficiency, yes. So all of those points combined, one way, the way I look at it is, is basically reducing the cost of cognition and creativity. Okay? Earlier, we used to have humans that are doing most of the cognition and the creativity. And if you needed a piece of work to be done, it required 4 humans. Now we can reduce it to 1. So it's reducing the cost of cognition and creativity. Now, what does that mean for us in the future? It doesn't mean that it's going to reduce the number of people doing stuff or more people will not be needed. What will happen is that the amount of content that is there in the market will increase with it. It's not going to reduce, it's going to make humans much more critical to the to that process. But I'll talk to it more later that who will be benefit from it most and who will be the losers, that might will come later on over that. But effectively what we're looking towards is it's reducing the cost of cognition and creativity. So next time when you're trying to produce an article, next time when you're trying to produce that image for graphics and so on for your content, it's going to be much more cheaper for you for that, because generative AI is able to help you out and say that you can produce this rather than 2 days, you can do it in 2 hours. Alright. Yes. So the other thing to remember is that this is a very famous diagram for adoption and innovation curve. And here is a common theme where you have your tech enthusiasts, which is in the early market, you have your innovators and early adopters. Then you have a big chasm where you have people who are sort of in the early majority, and then they move to late majority and laggards. Now, I assume from everybody who's in this room, they definitely don't want to be in the laggards or the skeptics over there, because they come over here. But at the same time, what I would like to emphasize is that in today's world, it will be much more difficult even if you are in the early majority and the late majority as well. So if you are in that bucket as well, you might lose out on a lot of it. So it's much more better for you to be in the innovators and the early adopters for that. And I'll give you the reasoning for it in the next slides as well. Now, just to show you an example of what does an early adopter do with this kind of technology, let me show you another video. So I'm not sure if everybody has seen this, but Coca-Cola actually came out with an ad around AI.
Awesome.
So is Alia there? Yeah. So my daughter Alia, when I played it to her, she asked me to play it 5 more times because she also loved it so much. And I think she's a big fan of art, so she loves the Van Gogh and the Vermeer and so on. So she said, I want to see it again and again. But I think here the main thing is that it's not just about that it was entirely created by AI. Okay, there are a lot of elements with the virtual human and so on. There was a lot of work that was gone in the back end. But the amount of time required to deliver it was reduced. The total cost was much more lower. And at the same time, the quality that you see is much more higher as well. So it's not just hitting in terms of, you're not looking at this as a cost reduction. You're not just looking at the boost, what's the boosting quality. You're not just looking at it, reducing the delivery time. It's all 3 of them in one go. So that's the main difference. And this is just the trailer in the sense that this is the current capabilities. What we also envision in the future is that you might give it a prompt and it might create an initial video for you end to end completely. That's the kind of capability that we envision in the next few years within this space. So that comes to my next point, which is around what does it mean for us? There's this wonderful book that I've read last year, which was it was released in 2021, end of 2021, but I got a chance to read 2022. And the book's name is The Exponential Age. And the author basically says that if you look at electricity took around 50 years to become part of mainstream. If you look at internet, it took around 10 to 15 years. If you look at ChatGPT, it took around 1 week for a million users, and so on. So the way these technologies are changing the way we live in our lives, in our society, the way we interact and the way we work is very drastically. It's going very fast. And he calls it an exponential age, where the way we are changing our lives is at an exponential rate. So what do we need to be aware in this exponential age? How do we need to tackle it? How do we need to approach it? That's what he talks about within this book. And what are our systems need to change accordingly? That's also quite impactful. So one of the things he mentions is that one of the biggest challenges is that governments or legislation and everything does not change at the same speed as technology. And what can we do in order to manage it? So education is an important piece. And that's why everybody here also has come through, because they feel that, okay, as part of this exponential change that we are seeing in our world, how can education help us manage that change in a manageable manner? Now, so the way you can embrace this exponential age and what would be the implications of content management is around there is rapid technological progress happening. There is an explosion of data and content that will happen along with it. And there is a component of AI becoming very important and central to content creation, curation, optimization, whatever you may be for that. At the same time, there is a lot of consumer empowerment that will come with it. Is that you need more interactive and personalized content. And at the same time, there is a need for adaptive learning as well. Ethical imperatives as well will become more important. So how could you possibly use this AI or generative AI within your work? Here, what we try to focus on is that how can you be more efficient in your content creation using generative AI? How can you be much more create deep personalization so that you don't have to worry about, okay, the same message for everybody. How can you be much more saying, okay, create this particular message for this kind of audience, this one for this one, and so on. How can you also use AI for more insights on top of it over there? So the example that you saw of Copilot over there, trying to go through an Excel sheet, giving you analysis, you can ask it a question and it will create this analysis and so on. That's quite important as well. And the other thing is around interactive experiences. How do you create more interactive experiences using AI? But I think one of the other core components is your strategy needs to change. You can't use the same strategy that you have been using in the past 5 years or 10 years and expect similar results. Now you will have to think from a different perspective over there. What is your strategy going to be in the future? How can you test, analyze, and refine your content much more faster and using AI efficiently? So what I also didn't want you guys to leave from this session is that this guy has just given me a few pointers and left it to me. I wanted an action plan for you guys as well. So here is something that you can possibly try. If you need more details, we can easily provide you something more. But first thing is boost your AI literacy. Understand how AI works, what are its downfalls, what are its benefits, what is the real value it's trying to drive. I was going to add a course over here, which is AI for everybody. It's by one of the pioneers of AI education called Andrew Ng. If you guys know Coursera, it's on Coursera and deeplearning.ai as well. So it's AI for everybody on that course. I'll always add a link later on. But at the same time, start talking about those use cases that you see within your organization. That okay, for which use cases can you use generative AI? For example, in your next campaign, can you create some images using generative AI and then test it out over there? Because testing will be the first step for it. Selecting the right tools, and this will require you to test what's out there in the market as well. ChatGPT is one solution, but I'm sure nobody has heard of Anthropic over here, by any chance. Huh? Anthropic? Only that guy in the back. So Anthropic is another kind of a large language model, which is coming up as a big competitor for ChatGPT. And it's able to actually take in more information than the ChatGPT that you have. ChatGPT can take around 2 pages of information effectively. Now I think around 3-4 pages of information, while the Anthropic one can take around 50 or 100 pages effectively. So that's why be on a lookout for different tools, see what their pros and cons are, and what can suit you for your use case. Another important thing is I was just having a chat with somebody and they mentioned that about Google Bard. That okay, Google Bard is in the market, it's actually much more better sometimes. In my questioning to lots of people, I've asked around 70% say ChatGPT is good, around 30% say we enjoy Google Bard more. So as per our current world, when we have different tools in the market, people will create their personalities around that. So some people will really like ChatGPT because they can give you can give silly instructions and it will still understand you and give you some good answers. While on the other hand, Google Bard is something that you need to be proper English, properly worded, and only then it will give you an answer. So it might be useful for them. For me, non-native speakers of English, it might be much more better for use ChatGPT in that case. Similarly, try and see pilot and implement. Try a small use case. See what you can do with it. It doesn't require, so if you are looking for ChatGPT, get the ChatGPT Plus version. For Google Bard, if you want to pay something a small amount and try and test it out over there. At the same time, start thinking from ethical compliance perspective. Where do you stand? What is the data privacy and other regulations that might be come into consideration when you're using this data or these tools? Start thinking about a measurement and optimization approach to say that, okay, are people responding to ads created by using generative AI, or are they responding to other conversations by us? At the same time, as you're doing right now, stay current. This field is changing every week. Literally, you have new things coming up within this area on a weekly basis. So I won't say that involve yourself or engross yourself in news every time, but every now and then, put yourself outside of your work and say that, okay, let me spend 2 hours to see what's going on within this field and talk to a few experts within this area to see, okay, how things changing on it. And the last point, I think, which I'll possibly emphasize the most, is that AI is a tool to enhance, not replace, human creativity and strategic thinking. So it's not about replacing people, it's about how do we enhance it for them. There's a very fine quote by somebody which said that AI will never replace humans, but humans will be replaced by people who know AI. So that's why it's very important for you to be abreast of what's happening within the field. How can you use AI to benefit you so that, what I said, you're not replaced. That's it. Yeah? That was all from my side.
So, our next speaker is Rachael Harwood, and she is a content designer with a BA in Art History and Media Studies and a background in digital marketing. She currently contracts as a digital experience specialist at Unitech. Rachael started her content career at one of Aotearoa's largest magazine publishing companies. This was followed by 7 years of digital marketing with a stint as a sub-editor. It was her introduction to UX writing that sparked a true passion for digital content. And she's here to share her insights on using ChatGPT to boost content productivity. So please give her a warm welcome.
Thank you, Habib. That was just such a,
He's
gone.
with his daughter.
Such a good sort of macro view of the whole business of generative AI. And thank you to Holly and Pascal and Daisy for organising this. I'm going to give you the too long didn't read, but please don't leave after I've said it. But I think my big point that I share with Habib is that if you do nothing else, it's go and fire up ChatGPT and play. I think that content people have a natural gift for language and problem solving. So you'll quickly see the potential. All you need to do is start experimenting. And yeah, as natural problem solvers, I think you will start to see that the new craft will be honing prompts for AI and becoming, leading that space in your content teams. You may even find that you start putting templates for prompts into your content style guides as they become more baked into your strategies. I'm going to say it, I don't find ChatGPT to be a great writer. I think it is, like Habib said, a tool to enhance your work. The writing that I've seen it produce is often a bit bland, if it's not completely weird. And yet it's my daily companion in my work. I have not let a day go by now where I've not consulted ChatGPT for something or another in what I'm doing. So in my talk, I'm just going to share some of the highlights. It's going to be specific use cases, and you'll notice that very few of them are actually to do with creating content. In case you didn't have it already from Habib, ChatGPT is a conversational AI. That means you can talk to it using your natural language and you'll get human-like responses. I think the conversational aspect is the most important part, though, that you can continue that conversation. Unlike in the past, I probably would have used a search engine to troubleshoot things I didn't know. If you get to page 2 and you haven't solved your problem, you're back to the drawing board. Whereas with this tool, you can continue to converse and refine and correct it. You can clarify things that it hasn't gotten right until you're in a place that actually works for what you need. These are the 3 big players in my world anyway. I hadn't heard of Anthropic either. OpenAI creates ChatGPT, Google has Bard, and Microsoft has Bing Chat. The biggest, most critical difference between the 3 is that Bard and Bing Chat browse the web, so you're getting live information. The ChatGPT Plus, which is the paid tier, supports web browsing using Bing, but you're looking at 37 New Zealand dollars a month if you want to use that service. That's also the superior tier, so ChatGPT's free version is an inferior product. So you might find that you want to toggle between the 2 of them and do a little bit of web browsing with the one that does that better and bring it over to ChatGPT to go further. You need a Google account for Bard, and you used to need a Microsoft account for Bing, but I think they rolled that back. It's worth noting that they are all of the content you put in as prompts has the potential to be read by human reviewers. So privacy is a concern, but I'll talk a little bit about privacy later. But If you don't want it to be read by someone, potentially, keep it out of ChatGPT. How does it help me? I think of ChatGPT as my infinitely patient colleague and subject matter expert. So I freelanced before, I work remotely most of the time. I've been the only content person in some teams, and having the arrival of ChatGPT has meant I've got someone who I can talk to when I'm trying to solve a problem. Often that would have been my husband who I bug for coding related questions, and you know, ChatGPT's patience endures beyond a human's. So if you don't get it, it doesn't judge you. If you need to ask a million clarifying questions to understand, it doesn't judge you. In that way, that Copilot product from Microsoft, it is a really great name for how you can use it, because it's like a Copilot that you can call on when you're solving problems. I see it as a user-friendly way to use the internet. The internet's full of information, if you didn't know. And ChatGPT is a way to interact with it in that human conversational way that we haven't had before, that you, instead of opening up 10 different websites to try and get to the knowledge you want, or having to watch somebody's video and having to go on through dead ends that don't go anywhere, you can ask for how to do something and get it back as a set numbered list, and you can just start working. So just quickly, you can use it for formatting. A really great example recently, our website at my work has an academic calendar in a HTML coded accordion with tables in it. It might not be the best user experience, but it is what it is. And I got sent a new academic calendar from one of the schools that needed to be put into that template. And I just thought, oh, I'll just give the code to ChatGPT, and I'll just give them the Word document with the 2 columns. And I said, make this go into that, and it did it in seconds. So, you know, that would have been me mucking around for about, you know, probably too long, and it saved me that time. So that was just a formatting one that I tried recently. I talk about gut checks, which is sort of that co-pilot element again, that when you think you might be onto it, but you're not sure if you're onto it. Is this clear? Have I made a mistake? Have I misunderstood? Could what I've written be misunderstood? You pop that into ChatGPT and just say, is this a plain language piece of text? Have I got the reading age right? Is there room for misunderstanding? And idea generation. This is the closest I get to getting it to help with writing. There's this phase of writing that I call the staring out the window phase, where you're just staring out the window and it doesn't look like you're working, but you're working really hard because you're trying to solve a problem, or you're trying to choose the right words for something. And it's a bit of donkey work before you get to the actual crafting of writing. And I've started to use ChatGPT for that purpose, that idea generation, thought association, which I'll go into in my examples. I won't dig into all of those, but just to give you an idea. So my first use case was formatting a video transcript. So I have to write a lot of how-to guides and knowledge-based content. Often that is in subject areas I'm not familiar with, and one of the ways I approached that was to get the subject matter expert to record a walkthrough with a tool called Loom, recording their screen, talking over the top of it, and then sending it to me. The great thing about Loom is you can grab a transcript from the video, and I would take that transcript and copy it into Word, and then I would rejig that manually until it matched our template that we used for how-to content. When I ended up making a video myself for to show people how to use a new Photoshop template, I thought this is the perfect opportunity to use ChatGPT. And I did it on the fly, and I probably could have been more specific with how I prompted it, but I just said, I've got this transcript, it's for a video, I want it to be a how-to guide, I want it to follow this template. So I just put in some details and I said, it needs a heading, a date, an overview of the task, and a couple of sentences. I think I said 3 sentences. I want a bulleted summary of what you need to do the task. I want logical headings for the sections of the guide, and I want numbered steps, and I'd like you to give me the output as HTML. And so I'll just quickly show you what that looked like. So I just had the prompt in there and then took the transcript out of Loom and pasted it over into ChatGPT, and away it goes, generating some code for me. The good thing about asking for it in code view instead of just text is that you can copy the code from a copy button that's at the top of the window. And I just did it so that I could show you how it renders. And so pasting it into a HTML renderer, and so this is what it wrote for me. From my own babbling over a how-to video, it pulled out all of the logical steps of that piece of instruction. And then I could iterate. So this was its first response. And I noticed that it had EG as an abbreviation. And so I said, can you write that in full? UI elements were put into quote marks, and our style is to put them as bold text. So I just kept saying, can you change that? Can you change the tone? It's a bit too formal. I want you to say things like check instead of verify. Can you change the placeholder style to our style? And I want the headings to be sentence case, not title case. So we could do that back and forth from that first prompt. And then the end result is, this is the original transcript, and it's the text that I could now share as a how-to document or continue to refine as the human in the loop, which is a term that I quite like. Being that human refiner at the end of the AI process. And if you consider that this probably took a max, apart from recording the video, which I did anyway, it was 5 minutes or less to get to that point. And it really speeds up that knowledge-based content creation process. And then if the prompt works well, you can save it into your content guidelines and use it again every time you need to do something like this.
Very cool.
Thank you. Technical help. I call this making it work with a quirky CMS because you know, the one that we have at work is a little bit out of date, but it is what it is. So there will be times when I can't find what I'm looking for, or there's unlabeled text input fields, or text input fields with really non-user-friendly labels, and I don't know what I'm supposed to be putting where. ChatGPT knows. So I can put the, like I took a bunch of fields out of the advanced image labeling pop-up, and I said, what do all of these mean? What are they used for? Are they important? Do they impact accessibility? And it gave me a reply, line by line, explaining all of these input fields that I'd never seen before. If I used a search engine, I could have been wasting time. It teaches me little bits of code and HTML. And yeah, UI names, node functions, things like that. So one of the things I used it for was, we have images that we put inline into articles, but there was a workaround being used when it came to captioning them. People were just putting some paragraph text beneath the picture. And I really wanted the images to have actual captions coded into them. But there was no caption field in the CMS that we were using. So I don't know enough HTML to do this myself. So I went to ChatGPT and asked it to do it for me. So I gave it the code that we already have in place for an image, and I just said, could you put a caption on there for me? And it came back with the code that I could copy straight out with the convenient button and an explanation of how it applied this code to it. So it's not just doing it, you're copying it, you do get a little learning experience as part of it as well, but also there's an ability to do a quick sense check if the explanation doesn't sound like it's plausible.
It's good context.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you get that context, and you get the ability to apply it going forward as well. So that's just a little example of a technical assist. This is a bit of a meatier example. I read a blog by a woman called Rebecca Wynn, who is a content designer at Indeed. And she talked about 3 content design artifacts that she can't live without. And one of them was a CTA, or a call to action safe list. So this is a list of approved calls to action that you could use across your product. And the first step of that process is to do an inventory and to do an audit. And because you have to know what you're using already to start standardizing and refining it. And so I thought this sounded like a really great idea, and I really wanted to give it a go for our work. And I thought I'll just give it a go manually. So I started the spreadsheet, and I was keeping a list of the text on the CTAs, what section of the website they were appearing on, the format, so were they links, were they buttons, or links styled as buttons. And then I made a few notes, and I made a note of the destination URL that the call to action was leading to. And I wasn't in a rush, but I spent about 2 hours collecting these 25 links across 10 pages. And that's when I started to realize that this was not a plausible approach. It was going to take too long. And, before pre-ChatGPT times, I probably would have pivoted to maybe a spot check, or maybe choose some sections of the website that I could zero in on that were more significant. But we are in the ChatGPT era. So I thought, what can we do? And I didn't have any expectations, but I just said, is there a way to scrape the website and get what I'm looking for, which is the call to actions, what the format of the call to actions is, and yada yada, all the details of the spreadsheet I was doing manually. And it came back with a Python script that we could run. And this is where I knew I had to rope in some support, because I'm not a coder, I'm not a programmer. But it was instantly showed me that this was possible. So I wrote down my husband, who has some front-end web dev knowledge, and he took over this part and continued to iterate the conversation with ChatGPT until we had refined the Python script that we needed to run. And potentially I could have got there myself, knowing how supportive it is as almost a tutor, but he was excited, so I let him do that. So just to clarify, ChatGPT was supporting the process of getting the script we needed to run. It wasn't doing any website scraping itself. It's about that learning to use the code. So we got this script, and we ran the script and got to this point where we were able to audit 3,498 pages of the website and collect nearly 134,000 links. And that was less than 2 hours. And my husband would like me to be very clear that one of those hours was passive because the script was running. So in terms of human hours, and that would have at my pace taken 688 hours, but really double that when you consider that it was only really 1 hour. So this was more thorough than we could ever have been as individuals. But the problem now was that it was very hard to deal with this data. I didn't know the next part of the process. So that's when I roped in the business insights lead at my work, because I knew he would buy into what I was trying to do, which was this audit to create these standards. And he had this genius idea to pivot the data around the destination URL. So we know that people are all being pointed to these places, but how are we pointing them to these destinations? And he tweaked the spreadsheet and sent it back to me, and I can just copy a page on the website of interest into another field, and I'll instantly get how many. So, for example, we've got a scholarships and awards page on the site, and I could find out that we were linking to that page over 300 times, but we were linking in 21 different ways. And some of them made sense, but some you could see that we were just saying very similar things in slightly different ways. So it's basically the exact result that I wanted. We now have a picture of the very slightly different ways that people are experiencing calls to action across the website that we can now set a standard for and document that for going forward. And I was really happy with that. And I think it's a really important reminder that ChatGPT is a great co-pilot, but you've also got all of your real co-pilots that are the colleagues that you have. So remembering to collaborate and cross-functionally as well to get to the results that you want to get to. So my fourth example, this is that staring out the window phase of writing for me. A bit of word association or thought association. And when I worked for Next Magazine in one of my previous jobs, one of the things I had to do, so it's a women's magazine, was come up with some headings and subheadings for articles that were going to feature in the magazine. And we would have to type about 5 different ideas and then put the piece of paper on the editor's desk to circle her favorite that would make it into the magazine. And when I had to do that, my process was to open a whole bunch of tabs on my computer that were online dictionaries, online thesauruses, rhyming dictionaries, idiom dictionaries, and I'd get this whole big cloud of ideas all associated with the topic. And then from there, I'd have some epiphany and come up with something really clever. And then when I got given the job to create some headings for a piece of sponsored content about one of our graduates of a welding course, I was going to do that exact thing, and then I thought, well, this has got to be something ChatGPT can help with. So I jumped in and asked it for exactly that. The topic is welding. Tell me words that are to do with welding. Tell me words that sound like welding. Tell me words that are linked to it, that rhyme with it, that are part of idioms associated with it. And critically, I asked it to explain its thinking, because you need to know how it got there, especially if the link is weak. And the results were mixed, is probably the accurate summation. It gave me a whole lot of stuff, which was really awesome. That's what I wanted. And it talked about, well, wielding sounds like welding. This is what AI is for, guys. It's breakthroughs like that. Torch I would never have probably come up with myself, and that's quite key. is that you don't know everything about everything. So if you're in the headline creating business and it's welding, you might want to lean on some support if you're not a welder. And filler was another I wouldn't have thought of myself. It had some other suggestions about holding it together, and I thought, oh, holding it together, you know, there's some potential there, that's nice. But yeah, in the end, I didn't accept any of its suggestions. And I think that that's important too, because I still would have spent 10 minutes doing all of this. And that doesn't sound like a lot of time, but if you're in the headline writing business, that adds up to a lot of time. And sometimes that is that gut check of, okay, yeah, the one I came up with from my own instincts was better, and I've exhausted some of the alternatives. And finally, it helped me solve a problem with SharePoint. So if you aren't aware of SharePoint, I mean, more or less it's the Microsoft equivalent of Google Drive or a shared drive. But yeah, I don't have a lot of experience, or at least I didn't. And we had a lot of how-to documentation. I was working on a lot of legacy how-to content, bringing it up to a new standard or to a new format. And I wasn't really sure how it was going to look in its final form, but one of my colleagues said, people still need to be accessing these documents, and we don't know how long the scope of this project's going to last. So we need to have a way for people to discover these articles and do their job. And the suggestion was, do we create a contents page that directs people to all of these documents? And I didn't feel like a contents page was the right solution, because it would require ongoing maintenance, especially with this being a project in motion. Everyone would be manually updating and there'd be a room for error. And so I thought, is there a way for us to have I wanted a kind of live contents page, or a way to just see what was already in the file, so that if things got deleted or consolidated, it was updated. And in the past, I would have Googled and probably wasted a lot of time. So I went to SharePoint, and it became like a co-pilot while I figured things out. And it recommended a custom view of the files in a document library, which seemed like a really good solution to the problem of ongoing maintenance. And we went through about 28 ongoing conversations throughout the day as I figured and refined the process of creating this document library with a custom view. And what I ended up doing was giving all the documents metadata of categories that they would fall into, because the critical part of having this contents page was for people to be able to search for what they needed based on the category of work they were trying to achieve. I'll just jump straight into my video. So the result was I was able to give a piece of category metadata to every document, as well as an existing or 2023 update status metadata, so people could tell what was old. And then you can group by category, and this is the view that really made a difference. Now we can see all of the how-to documents, but underneath a heading based on the category that they've been assigned. So if they're looking for forms or code help or navigation, they can just look to the category heading that relates to the work they're trying to achieve. And you can also filter, so if they know what they're looking for, maybe you can just select a couple of categories and view those. But having that existing in 2023 view means that there's a kind of signifier that you're seeing the new content, this should be up to date, or you're looking at old content, so tread carefully, it might not solve your problem quite like you need it to. And And I shared that with my team, and they were really pleased with how that worked as an organisation of that content. So I would not have got to that point, I don't think, if I didn't have that co-pilot aspect to ChatGPT. I would have felt like I was bugging somebody who had other things to do, and I was sort of figuring it out slowly throughout the course of the day. And it was really good to sort of lean on that as a learning opportunity. So the last little thing I want to talk about is the danger zone. So I think a lot of businesses, their official line is to not put sensitive information into ChatGPT. And I think that generally that's a good idea, is to use extreme caution when sharing sensitive information. And privacy is a big risk factor with these tools, and making sure that you don't put any personal identifiable information into the conversational AI, because it is a risk if it's read by real people. Hallucinations and bias. It can make things up. It wants to be conversational. It will be confidently incorrect. And, we all know someone who's like that, and ChatGPT is one of those folks. So one thing I've read recently that someone suggested was ask it to not make things up. It seems so simple, but yeah, you just say don't. If you don't know, tell me, ask some clarifying questions, or be clear that you are that you do not know the answer to this question. Otherwise you'll get like a certainty and followed by something that, and I think if the stakes are low enough, it's not always a concern if things are inaccurate, because you're going to figure it out at some point in your process. But I think you can use a bit of common sense to know when things need a double checking before you don't want to be like the lawyer who got himself into hot water citing cases that didn't exist because he pulled them out of ChatGPT. Bias is another big problem. The source of all its knowledge is the internet, and the internet is full of bias, and that there is a risk of redistributing that bias if you use ChatGPT to create your content. I think that smarter people than me will be working hard, hopefully, to solve that problem, but I think the best thing we can do is to educate ourselves about bias, to be aware of it, the forms that it can take, so that you can scrutinize AI's content. It can also give harmful information. They're working hard to train it to not be able to do that, but there are workarounds. This LinkedIn post from Jack Garfinkel, they commented on the ethics of ChatGPT. It won't give you a recipe for napalm, but if you ask for a story in the style of your grandma, it will give you granddad's family recipe. So it can be outsmarted. And problem solving, correct me, Habib's not here to correct me if I'm wrong, so I'm just going to power ahead with the confidence of ChatGPT. Its superpower is conversation. It wants to give human-like responses. It doesn't always solve problems with the computational reasoning skills. And that can come, things like maths, basic addition, it will get wrong. I asked it for some scheduling support when it first arrived on the scene, because I thought it would be amazing. I'd be able to plug in my working hours and my husband's working hours and our kids' school pickup times, and it would tell me, oh, I've got you, Rachel, this is how you need to structure your day. But it was giving these 60-hour weeks and 12-hour days and like really like chill Fridays with not much on, and I just knew it wasn't getting it right, and I didn't understand, because I don't understand how they're built, but I since come to realize it's because it's just talking to you, and it's just trying to sound human. It's just trying to pass that Turing test. And so be very wary of using it for tasks it's not designed for. And finally, just some tips for prompting. So if you don't know already, it's called a prompt, the message you put into ChatGPT. And the more specific the words and parameters you put in, the better the result that you get will be. You can define the desired creativity. It's actually baked into Bing Chat, the Microsoft one. You can set toggles between conservative or creative replies. You would want to choose a more conservative reply if you're looking to be taught something, or you want accuracy, you want facts, then you don't want it to be being creative. But if you are actually in the business of creating something where you want it to be random and a bit left field, then you could ask it to be more creative. And you can ask for response, you can ask for the output to be in a particular format, like a table, or as code, markdown code. You can ask for it to give you placeholders in the text. So, give me some content, but leave all these gaps for this information, and I'll put that in later. Iterating in the chat, I think that's a really good thing to remember, that you can just keep refining it in the chat as opposed to taking it out and doing it yourself, because then you can just constantly refine. It can draw on previous parts of the conversation, and then you can just copy out the result and use it elsewhere. I read on OpenAI's support that you can separate the text from the prompt with these 3 quotation marks or 3 hash symbols. So, for example, if you've got a prompt that you're putting in and it relates to some content that you want it to review, you could write a prompt and then separate the content with these symbols so that it knows what it's doing and what it's reading. And you can also get ChatGPT to write its own prompts. So if you have a goal of something you want to achieve, but you're not quite sure how to put it into words, then you can say, well, here's what I'm trying to achieve. What do you need me to ask you to then get this result? And it will then endeavour to write its own prompt for you. Just another reminder that you can ask it to not make stuff up as well. So what next? I think when I wrote the description for this talk, I said that it kicked the door off its hinges when it arrived, and that has been what happened for me. It is here to stay, and I want my craft to involve AI, and I want to become good at using it. And I think that is a really good position for most content people to put themselves in. And I think we're well poised for that, to hone our craft as prompters. So start developing a friendship with it and play with it, because it really is, even if it's not in a professional setting, you can just have a lot of fun playing around with it, and then you might just have some ideas click into place. So yeah, find some space for it in your work, and then share it with the group so that we can all grow together. And I put a few resources together for when the slides are shared afterwards, which include some prompt help, links to the 3 I mentioned before, and also you can check text to see if it's written by AI. It's not super accurate, but it's something you can plug content in if you're wondering. And yeah, that's me. Any questions?
You go back one, I want to take a photo of those.
Yeah.
That list. Thank you.
Now I'm going to go back to this so that you can see all my vital statistics.
Pass the mic? Yeah, I'll pass the mic.
Hi, so do you have like any certain phrases that works well with ChatGPT, like, certain keywords? Because I have used it like certain times and it gets quite repetitive. Like if I ask it to rewrite something for me, then it gets like repetitive. So, I mean, is there any keyword or something?
Thank you. I haven't established any sort of patterns yet because I keep using it for lots of different things, but I think it comes back to that specificity. When it seems to have gone wrong, I point out specifically what it's failed to do, and it apologizes every time as well, which is nice. But I think it just comes back to trying to be as specific as possible. But it could just also be that the issue is that it's trying to do some thinking that it's not powered to do. But yeah, no, I think setting some patterns that work is a really great next step though, and I think that's what I'd like to do as well.
Two questions, but the first one relates to that. You're training your ChatGPT to behave a particular way with you. If you jumped onto someone else's one, would it be, is it actually learning how to work with you in a specific way? And you're actually training it like a virtual assistant, and it's figuring that out so it knows that with you, kind of what you're looking for, and if you jumped onto someone else's one, it would be stupid again. Is there an aspect of that, and how are you training it?
I think, in my experience, it only remembers within the single chat. So if you've been working on a problem and you go through the entire chat, then it remembers and builds on that. But that doesn't go across chats, and I would think it definitely wouldn't go across other people's accounts. But I think this is what I hope is going to happen, is that will happen. But also training it on documents, I think would be amazing to be able to go, here's our entire style guide, and putting it into the system, and then you can just go, does this content adhere to our style guide? And it can go, yes, it does. Or that's what I hope. And I think there are like startups and new software out there that are promising that kind of functionality. But it's outside of my world of experience.
But at this stage, you could figure out the key things and create a template that goes at the top of each query that you put, and it would be consistent.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, but I have found that it does respond differently to things I think I've asked the same way in the past. Like, some of the things I put in my slide were based on things I did ages ago, but then I redid them so I could take the video, and I don't think the results were the same. So I don't know if that's because of the training, just how massively it's being trained all the time, or what, or if there was some subtle human difference that's got a butterfly effect that changes the whole output. But no, I haven't seen a lot of evidence of sort of a bigger learning. But yeah, that would be something Habib would probably.
Thank you. Two questions also. First off is, I noticed you said bias. Have you noticed any bias in a particular male or female direction over time? Because I noticed in the early stages, definitely was male orientated, but it has softened.
In my experience, My comments on bias are more from what I've seen online, people talking about results that they've received. I know someone really put it through its paces around, that classic bias of nurses are female and doctors are male, and ChatGPT could not get its head around this male doctor in the scenario. So I've definitely seen people cherry picking examples, but in terms of the big picture, I haven't. I haven't encountered bias in anything I do because I haven't really used it for content writing or generating. So yeah, it would be interesting to see what other people are saying about it for sure.
And the next question is more about, have you be able to frame, we have what I'm writing for is targeted for between 24 and 35 people. So you've said that and you put it, it's male and female that work in the advertising industry, for example. Have you been framing it like that too?
I have tried that, yeah. I have said the audience for this is going to be students, they're going to be of this age, make it appropriate for the Aotearoa New Zealand context, and I feel like it responds to that prompting. Whether or not that's just because it feels like it does, I don't know, because sometimes it all feels good, but then you actually, if you pick it apart, maybe it has just made it sound really like it's done the right thing, because it all comes down to you don't know what you don't know. So if I said, generate this content targeted at men who live in a country I am not familiar with, I can't audit the veracity of that response. So that's what I mean by stakes. I think if the stakes are high and you want your content to be accurate, then I would just go in with a position of distrust. But I think it's going to get better over time. Yeah.
Thank you. I've got my second question.
Yeah, I thought you had to.
On the subject of distrust, you said anything you put in there, just assume that some human may look at it. What's the story with that? Who might look at it? How might they look at it? Where are things at with privacy and things that you put in?
I kind of jumped into the privacy policies for those three, and all of them somewhere said that human trainers do read the content to check for abuse, for it to be used for nefarious purposes. But real humans are reading, but obviously they can't at the scale of 1 million users in the first week. So it's kind of more like it could be than it is, I'm guessing. But they have all in their privacy policies mentioned that human reviewers check at a spot checking level, I'm guessing.
So I couldn't search for Rachael Harwood and what
it knows nothing about me, I've already checked. Yeah, I think that that's why I would be cautious. One thing I had in my slides that I got rid of for time purposes, but I'll just mention is hype. There's so much hype online, especially like Twitter and LinkedIn. People are every day they're talking about new plugins, new software that are using generative AI or similar, and it's all kind of like ChatGPT. So last year, this is the 10 things that are going to change your life. And that's probably where I would start to exercise the most caution, because your organizations are going to probably only approve, you're going to have to go with what your organization approves for the security of your organization. And it's probably going to be harder to get some of the new players over the line if they're brand new, and the privacy might be more of a concern. So I would say, and the Privacy Commissioner did say that they expect organisations to be doing their due diligence of what they incorporate into their organisation at an enterprise level. So I would say that they're going to be scrutinised pretty closely, especially if customer data is included. But but ChatGPT did say they're working on an enterprise version, so that might be even stricter in terms of privacy. I'm not sure. It's a big question mark for me on that.
Someone will hack it at some point.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to this conversation, so it's more of a comment than a question. I was attending another workshop on the subject that was run by a researcher from Waikato. So they are developing different machine learning models and the AI. And one of the key takeaways that I've got from that workshop was that currently researchers across the world, they don't know what these companies do with this data, how they work with this. There is no proof. So their recommendation in general is go with distrust rather than trust. Definitely don't put any personal information in. Don't use it for legal purposes or anything. So just be super cautious because there is no clarity around it. It's just that zone for now.
Yeah.
Just as a side comment on one of your things you said with Microsoft Bing, I don't sign into my account when I use my Edge, but I checked it out. Check it out with Bing because you can just right-click and check. You have to sign in. So it uses your Microsoft account, be it
When was that?
your Outlook account, your private, your personal one, and or you could use your.
Because I read something yesterday, I think, that said that they no longer require a Microsoft login, but maybe, yeah, I'm not sure.
So that I did my update just yesterday on the PCs,
okay.
and I thought I'd just check it out because before you didn't.
Yeah.
Whereas now
You do have to log in.
well, I did. I don't know if it's because it needs another update, maybe.
Yeah. Good point.
Thank you. Just wanted to ask, what are some best ways to improve the outcome if you're not happy with the first draft? Because what I usually do is I would try to give some feedback. Let's say, oh, this is not quite relevant, or like the flow of text doesn't really flow well. But I'm wondering if it's like necessary, or like is there any good way to improve like the second draft?
I don't know if anyone else has done more sort of content creation with ChatGPT and wants to speak to that question. Yeah, and again, I think it just comes down to specifying where it's going off the rails. Sometimes I just abandon ship and say this is. I talk to it quite conversationally because I'm working by myself and I'll just tell it it's terrible or it's bland or boring or this doesn't really meet what I asked for or you got that completely wrong. But then it kind of just goes, yeah, oh, I'm sorry, you're right, I did get it wrong. Here's another version and it's just as bland and wrong as before. But I think that's why my position on it as a tool is that I don't tend to use it for creating creative writing, but I found it infinitely useful in this way. But it's only, I assume, going to get better, and it might just need more training, or maybe as one of the others mentioned, if it starts to learn you better and can be trained on you and your feedback, it might improve. But with everyone being But yeah, I'm sort of speaking outside of my expertise as well. I find that it same as you, I find it just doesn't do a great job, and you can try and be clear about what you want and give it another go. And then I would just almost go back to that original sort of ideation phase and go, well, if you're not going to be helpful with the writing, can you be helpful at giving me some clarity, and then maybe even an outline or some things that then you can jump in.
The way I think when I use it is that the context determines the content. So I just try and give it the best context that I can, do's and don'ts and hows and whys, so that it can understand and then it does a better job sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The parameters, setting those strict parameters about what you don't want it to do. Yeah, it's a really good point.
Oh, it feels weird standing. I'll come over here so it's not like I'm moving. But yeah, I think it is just playing around because I'll say, write a short article about this and it'll go on for about 10 pages, right? So specifying the words, playing around with that. And then if I do say write an article, there might be a sentence at the start that kind of sounds good, and you take it out, put it somewhere else, kind of rewrite it, mix two sentences together. And then I chuck that back in again and say, what is this? How does that then, like, what does it pull from that? Can you reword this? Can you take this and make it more? So, like, it's still that human element of taking it out, rearranging, chucking it back in, and then just playing and see what it will take.
Yeah.
That's why I use it.
Yeah. I had this whole metaphor that I was gonna go into and I kept hesitating about it, but I have an art history background, and when I found out that Leonardo da Vinci, when he produced paintings in the Renaissance workshop, that not all of it was painted by his hand, I was shook. And the idea that these famous Renaissance masterpieces had the foundations painted by assistants and apprentices. As long as Da Vinci came along and finished the significant parts of the composition, like the faces and the hands, they could produce art at scale for the patrons who, Da Vinci was getting pretty famous in his day, and they couldn't keep up with the demand. And I see it as that aspect that you have this kind of, and the reason I hesitated is I don't want to diminish human creativity, because I don't, and I certainly don't want to link what I'm saying to generative art, because I have different feelings about generative art than I do about this ChatGPT. But as a metaphor for working at scale, when you're in content and you're trying to meet a lot of demands and there's only one of you, or there's maybe, Chloe's got a great ratio of content to designers. But if you have that AI foundation that you then come in as the human with the craft, then you get to do your work at a scale that you might not have previously, which is, I think, what it's useful for.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was just so inspiring. Just so much to take away and just go and play around with, I think. So everyone please give a warm hand to her. To close us out, we'll have closing karakia with Daisy.
Kia tau, kia tātou katoa. Te atawhai o tō tātou ariki a ihu karaiti. Me te aroa o te atua. Me te whiwhinga tahitanga. Ki te wairua tapu. Aki, aki, aki. Amen. Kia ora.
Kia ora.